In this tutorial, we'll learn how to save files in Krita and the differences between the JPG and PNG image formats. This tutorial is intended for beginners who are new to the world of digital image editing. Let's start by learning what you should not do. A common beginner mistake when starting using image editing software. First, let's start by opening an image in Krita. Then we make some edits to it, and then we click on File, Save, because we want to save the file. You can see here that Krita shows a dialog to save as JPEG because the file that we opened has the .jpg file extension, which is normally used by the JPEG format. However, if we click on the OK button to save, what is going to happen is that it's going to overwrite the file that we opened, so we lose the original data permanently. This is not what you want to do because you can't undo this after you have done it. Luckily, this is just an image that I downloaded from the internet, but if it was an important photo and there was no backup, it would have been ruined forever. Let's see how you save files the correct way now. Open the image file as normal, make some edits, and then when we go to save, instead of clicking on just save, we click on Save As, which lets us choose where to save the file and which format to use to save the file. The Save File dialog is going to open, and you can see here that it has the JPG file extension. And the File Type button reads JPEG image as well. Let's click on this and change it to Krita Document. As you can see, this changes the file extension to .KRA. Now we click on Save, and the Krita document will be saved separately from our original image. This is Krita's proprietary format. Just like Photoshop has .PSD files, GIMP has .xcf files, Clip Studio Paint has .clip files, Paint Tool SAI has .sai files, Fire Alpaca or Medibang has .mdp files, Krita has .KRA files. These are all different proprietary formats, which means the features they support are different. In Krita's case, the .KRA format also an open source format, which means that it's easier for programmers of other software to implement ways to open the .KRA files in their own software if they wanted to. However, that doesn't necessarily mean these files will open properly in other software, since there are some features that Krita has that other software don't have. For example, most applications do not have an erase blend mode, which Krita has. If Clip Studio Paint opened a .KRA file with this blend mode, it wouldn't display the document right, since it doesn't have an equivalent blend mode. On the other hand, if a file doesn't use unique Krita features, then other software may be able to display them properly without much issue. Let's close our image. When no file is opened, Krita will display a list of your last opened images. You can see it includes both the JPEG file and the Krita document. We could click on one to open them instantly, but let's just drag and drop instead. Here is the Krita document with our edit, and here is the original JPEG image. It's intact without any edits. It's important to keep in mind that any accident like clicking the wrong button could ruin the photo file, so it's always good to have backups of important things, including of your Krita documents with finished edits. By the way, it's possible to clear these recent images by clicking on this clear button. Next, I'm going to show a faster way to save the image file as a Krita file by using the keyboard instead of the mouse. Instead of clicking on File, Save As, we're going to press Ctrl-Shift-S. You can see that the file name field already has keyboard focus. We can press the End key on the keyboard to move the text cursor to the end of the file name field. Then we can press Ctrl-Backspace to erase the file extension. We type KRA, which is Krita Document's file extension, and then we press the Enter key to confirm the dialog. And with this, Krita saves the Krita document, and we didn't even need to touch the mouse to do this. Now that we know how to save as a Krita document, let's learn a bit more about the other image file types. There are so many image file types that Krita supports. Which file types should we use? Generally speaking, you're always going to save your project as a Krita document so that you can edit it later in Krita. Most software can't open proprietary formats like Krita documents. Instead, they open common formats like PNG and JPEG. This means that normally you will want to export your finished work to one of these formats in order to post it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, or other social media, or even to share it with people who don't have Krita installed. In some cases, there are reasons to use GIF and WebP formats. However, you're unlikely to use any of the other formats unless you are using a specific software that requires them. Let's take a look at the difference between a Krita document and a PNG in practice. First, I'll create a new Krita document and draw something in it. Now I'm going to save this as a Krita document file with the KRA extension. Next, I'm going to click on File, Export in the menu bar, and I'll export this as a PNG file. The difference between export and save as is that when you use save as, it changes which file is currently open in Krita, but when you use export, it only exports the file without changing which file is currently open. Now let's close this and try opening our saved files. If we open the Krita document, we can see that it's just the way we saved it. However, if we open the PNG file, it's not going to be exactly the same. It looks the same, but we don't have our layers separated anymore. That's because the PNG format doesn't support the concept of layers. If we want to edit the layers separately later, we will need to save it in a format that supports layers. By the way, if you have an image with multiple layers that you want to turn into a single layer, you can just go to the menu bar and click on Layer, Flatten Image. This will create a single layer image, and I believe that this is what Krita does internally before saving a PNG file. Next, let's learn how JPG works. Here I have a cool graphic that I made with a grid pattern clipped to a circle. As you can see, it's an opaque circle on a transparent background. Let's export this as a JPG file. Now let's try opening the JPG file inside Krita. As you can see here, it doesn't look the same way anymore. The transparent background is gone. We have an opaque white background now. This happens because the JPG format doesn't support transparency like the PNG format does. This means that when we export to JPG, Krita automatically adds an opaque background color to the image before saving it. You can't use JPG to save transparent images, but what is the difference between PNG and JPG when saving opaque images? The easiest way to understand the difference between these two formats is with a practical example. First, I'm going to open this image I downloaded from the internet in Krita. Now, I'm going to delete the original image to make things less confusing. Then I'm going to save the image as a Krita document, as a PNG file, and as a JPG file. Keep in mind that we haven't edited the file at all, so the only thing that we did was open a JPG file and save it as PNG and then as JPG again. Let's take a look at their difference. The first thing to notice is the file size. The PNG file is over 300 kilobytes in file size. That's quite a lot for an image that has less than 500 pixels of width or height. Now let's see the JPG file. The JPG file only has a bit over 50 kilobytes in file size. This is one important difference. In almost all cases, a JPG file is going to be much smaller than a PNG file. One situation where the PNG file can be smaller is if you are working with images that have a tiny number of colors, such as pixel art, and you specifically use the setting to use a color palette when saving the PNG. However, this is a very rare situation, so we can simply say the JPG is smaller than PNG in general. Now let's see where this difference in size comes from. I'll grab the PNG file and drop it into the canvas, so now we should have the same image twice as separate layers. The bottom layer is the JPG that we had opened at the beginning, while the second layer is the PNG that we saved. Let's see if they are exactly the same image or not. We can do this by changing the blend mode of the top layer from normal to difference, which is in the negative category. This blend mode will show us the difference between the top layer's colors and the bottom layer's colors. If there is no difference, the color will be black. This looks perfectly black to me, so I guess there is no difference at all. It's exactly the same image. Now let's do the same thing with the JPG file. First, we're going to drag and drop the file as a layer. As you can see, it looks exactly the same as the PNG image, so maybe there is no difference at all. Let's change the blend mode to difference. I can actually see a bit of blue at the bottom part of the image, which means that this is not the exact same image anymore. I don't know if this is perceptible in video, so I'm going to add a new filter layer to make it clearer. The filter I'm going to use is the levels filter. Essentially, I'm going to make it so that even the slightest amount of lightness becomes fully white so that we can tell which pixels are not perfectly black. As you can see, there are differences everywhere in the image when we compare the JPG file that we saved from Krita to the original JPG file that we opened in Krita. When we look at the PNG, it's perfectly black, even with the filter enabled, but the JPG looks like this. Why did this happen? The reason for this is that PNG uses lossless compression while JPG uses lossy compression. When we save the file as PNG, the exact same colors of the pixels are saved in the PNG file. To keep them exactly the same way, the file size ends up being larger because it can't change the colors at all. Meanwhile, JPG is allowed to change the colors, so it tries to reduce the file size by discarding color information that isn't perceptible to the human eye. Consequently, we end up with a file that looks exactly the same at first glance to the human eye. But when we look at the exact color of the pixels, we are able to see that it hasn't saved exactly the same colors. It's important to understand that this file was a JPG image before and that we didn't edit it at all. The only thing that we did was save it as a JPG again. This is enough to change the colors of the exported image. Now they are no longer the original colors, and there is no way to recover those original colors. In other words, we have lost the color data due to compression. It's a lossy format. Whenever you open a JPG and save it as a JPG, this is going to happen. The same thing is true for lossy video and audio formats, such as MP4 and MP3. When you save a JPG file, it's also possible to specify the quality of the compression. Higher quality means that less color data will be lost, while lower quality means that more color data will be lost. Generally speaking, you will want to use a quality level between 50 and 90. This setting is common in pretty much any application that can save JPG files. However, it's not actually a setting of the JPG image format standard. Instead, the JPG format uses quantization tables to configure the level of compression in the image. Applications show a simple slider to the user and translate the value in the slider to an appropriate value for the quantization tables that the JPG encoder actually uses. This means that 90% JPG quality in Krita doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as 90% JPG quality in other software, because this number doesn't go directly into the JPG encoder. Each application can have its own algorithm to tune the encoder from the quality percentage. This is how you save a file in Krita. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.